Namaste and bright blessings to you all. Welcome back to day 2 of the 7th International Conference and Gathering of Elders hosted by ICCS International Centre for Cultural Studies. My name is Falguni, one of the national coordinators for ICCS UK, and I'll be your host for today. Ancient cultures, like all diversity on our planet, is sadly under threat. Yet these ancient cultures have the software to help us reimagine our systems and institutions that can help us make human life sustainable again and to restore our world. This conference will give us first-hand access to experts and elders from over 40 ancient traditions. The gathering will also bring together a global community of activists and well-wishers like yourself who are ready to be informed, inspired, and instructed to act and bring about tangible change in our communities. This event has been organised by ICCS, International Centre for Cultural Studies, which is a non-profit organisation with a mission to facilitate the revival of diverse ancient cultures of the world by fostering a forum for learning, understanding, and networking. ICCS was set up 25 years ago. It's run by volunteers and has local centres around the world from India, East Africa, Indonesia, Europe, USA, and Colombia. We usually host this international conference every 3 years in India, but this year is certainly unique. And with the grace of our technology gods and goddesses, we have brought this conference directly to you in the comfort of your home. It's our first virtual conference with over 650 participants registered from across the world and across 3 different time zones. You're now watching the Europe and Africa regional program. This weekend, we will be exploring the theme, Ancient Cultures Championing Humanity. We had a fantastic first day, and I hope you are looking forward to today's talk as much as I am. So let's see what we have in store for you today. We have talks by our expert speakers and 2 panel discussions. Further details on this can be found on the Hoover app. Just click onto the agenda section. Otherwise, during each transition, you will see a timetable for the day. We want this conference to be as interactive as possible. So during each session, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions to our speakers. Now, you will be required to submit your questions via the Hoover app. So please use the chat function and ask away any questions. Also, there's plenty of lively discussions going on there as well, I've been told. And there's also a section for jokes. So it's definitely a great place where there's lots of communication and relationship build happening. So please do join our community on the Hoover app. Without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce our first speakers, Ima Burke and Lyudmila Klasanova. Ima is the chosen chief of order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, OBOD, and lives in Kinkili Island. Ima runs a private practice and is a counselling psychologist. Ima's interests in Druidry and psychology have led her to act as a celebrant, helping people to design and enact meaningful rites of passage. Ima has a love for ancient Irish tales and has a passion for storytelling. She particularly enjoys showing people the sacred sites of Ireland. Ima is also a priestess dedicated to Danu in the Fellowship of Isis. She is an archdruidess in the Druid clan of Dana and a member of the Noble Order of Tara. Lyudmila Klasanova is a researcher in Indo-Tibetan Buddhism and yoga teacher. She completed her PhD in Indian and Tibetan literature and culture at Sofia University, Bulgaria, where she also taught as Buddhist art, where she taught Buddhist art, women in Buddhism, Tibetan culture and religions of East Asia. She worked as a researcher and a curator in the field of Buddhist and ancient art at the National Gallery of Bulgaria. Since 2016, Lyudmila is Buddhist Store Global's East Europe correspondent, writing articles about Buddhism in Eastern Europe, Russia, and Mongolia. Author of the book Female Figure in Buddhism of India and Tibet. So I'd like to welcome both Ima and Lyudmila. Now, Ima will be conducting an opening ceremony followed by their talk on how ancient tradition inform our role in modern society. So over to you, Ima. Thank you.
Isei Wurvaha Galer. Hello, everyone. That is an ancient way of saying hello in Ireland. So I invite you all to close your eyes. Shikon Suvnes Sales Agus Gro Honor Shin Shur Shikon Suvnes Sales Agus Gro Dalef Shikon Suvnes Sales Agus Gro Spare Shikon Suvnes Sales Agus Gro Unavarigi Shikon Suvnes Sales Agus Gro Duin Galer. Peace, serenity, love and light from our ancestors. Peace, serenity, love and light from the earth. Peace, serenity, love and light from the sky. Peace, serenity, love and light from the seas. Peace, serenity, love and light to us all. Gorau Auli, and so it is. You may open your eyes. Hi, Lyudmila. Good to see you again.
Namaste. Здравейте in Bulgarian, Tashidele in Tibetan.
Wonderful, wonderful. So we're here having a conversation about how I suppose, the ancient traditions that we follow and how they can inform our role in modern society. And as a Druid, although we know of Druids from ancient times, ours is a broken lineage. And it was interesting in the sessions yesterday, Ngcobo from South Africa was talking about her concerns about her traditions being lost. We had a presentation on revival of Hellenism, revival of Rodnovery in Poland, for example. And Druidry comes from a broken lineage, although there was a revival 300 years ago in Britain. And then it's been there, I suppose, in a broken, mysterious way under the surface here in Ireland and perhaps in Wales, Scotland. And I know you come from an unbroken lineage. Would you like to speak a little bit about that?
Yes, of course. First of all, take a little break to express my deep gratitude to the organizing of this enlightening conference and the technical team, and especially Professor Shashibala, the president of the International Center for Cultural Studies India, and Marta Snobinska. It is a great honor to participate in such an amazing event, and it was so inspiring to watch the speakers yesterday, to learn so much about different traditions, to hear very touching messages. So thank you all. And yes, today we are going to try to establish a bridge between the traditions and modernity. And as you said, I belong to unbroken tradition, but what does it mean belong? So I'm Bulgarian. I come from Orthodox background, which I respect through my life, of course, Orthodox Christianity. But I discovered the message of the Eastern philosophy, culture, especially Indian and Tibetan, more than 25 years ago. And this is what I can say my heart belongs to. So the traditions, they tell us about the role in the modern society, and tradition, modernity, they all connected with the past, present, and future. It's all the aspects of time. So what I was thinking to mention today is the Asian system of Kala Chakra, which means the wheel of time, the time that encompasses all. So when we talk about Kala Chakra, it belongs to Indian and Tibetan philosophical systems. And yes, Kala Chakra and also Buddhism as a whole, and especially Tibetan Buddhism, is unbroken lineage, which means the teachings of Buddha himself, the founder of Buddhism, Buddha Shakyamuni, who was a Prince Siddartha, his messages, his teachings are preserved in the canon, Buddhist canon. They were translated in many languages, and they were spread to the whole world until nowadays in unbroken lineage. So the problem of authenticity, the pure lineage, is the foundation. Yeah.
So, I mean, we don't have ancient teachings and we don't have dogma and Druidry, but we have values. And there's always that fear of when you have dogmatic teachings that there's always a risk of fundamentalism. So how do you manage that within Tibetan Buddhism?
Usually when we say fundamentalism, we think about other religion, which I don't want to mention in this sense, but all the religion has beautiful messages at the bottom. But usually in Buddhism as a whole, yes, there are dogma, there are rules, there are vows, even for the beginners, let's say the one who is taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, entering in the path of Buddhism. There are particular precepts, vows, and they are, of course, much more different for the monks and the different levels of monks. But what is really essential with dogmas is, first of all, to understand them. To really understand why we need to take them, what is at the base, because the danger of fundamentalism comes when we follow something like a dogma which we really don't understand, and we have this blind, we can say blind faith, or we follow blindly the rules.
So, and I think we had an earlier conversation that what we have are from ancient traditions, they're the values we shared. I have worked in Africa, in Kenya, Lesotho, and Tanzania. So I'm not speaking as an African, but what I will speak, in this conversation is around the points of connection where I've worked with healers in Africa and the shared values. And you and I have shared values. And certainly in Druidry, there are values that we have. And I suppose one is peace, and I know certainly you as a Tibetan Buddhist. Do you want to speak about that?
Yes, of course, peace is the most beautiful subject to talk, but what is more important is not to talk about it, but to experience and to preserve deep in our heart. And actually, the Kala Chakra, the ritual, which is led by His Holiness Dalai Lama, most of all, in the whole world, is dedicated to the world peace. This is the main reason. And what means world peace or outer peace in terms of Buddhist practitioner? This means achievement of inner peace, and not only achievement of inner peace during a meditation for 5, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, but our efforts to preserve this state of inner peace in our daily life, and to be able to share with the people around, to dedicate to the outer peace. So everything matters, like a drop in the ocean. Our inner peace can contribute to the outer peace.
That's beautiful. We have a Druid's peace prayer. Deep within the still center of my being, may I find peace. Silently within the quiet of the grove, may I share peace. And gently in the greater circle of humankind, may I radiate peace. So it's really interesting, you know, these two different traditions and where we meet. I know one thing that we're talking about ancient traditions, so connecting with ancestors. And when I went to Africa, I was fascinated by the notion of the tribe consisting of the ancestors, those who live in the other world, who have been here, those who are living on this plane, and those who have yet to be born. And we have there's a triad, 3 tasks of a Druid is to live fully in the present, to honor the ancestors and our tradition, and to hear the voice of tomorrow. And that's exactly what this conversation is about. And you mentioned that about time, about past, present, and future. And that notion of, and I know you talk about that notion of interdependence in Tibetan Buddhism.
Yeah. Yes, exactly, the past, present, and future. And you mentioned ancestors, and in Tibetan systems, another fundamental aspect is the continuum of the mind. And of course, the belief of reincarnation, which is connected strongly with the karma, the law of cause and effect, reincarnation, and this continuum of the consciousness, which is just changing the bodies and continue until enlightenment. And even during the enlightenment, the final stage, you have a choice to decide whether to abide in the eternal peace in nirvana or to come back in samsara in order to help others. This is the image of Bodhisattva, to Sempa in Tibetan, the one who gives a vows to come back and to help others, and to continue the lineage of all enlightened beings who are devoting and dedicating their life to saving the world and helping the all mother sentient beings.
Yes, and that, of course, ties in with one of a key value in Druidry is that of service and being of service to something other or greater than ourselves, and that sense of the love of all existences, which brings in your love of all sentient beings, and that notion of responsibility and looking at our actions through an ethical lens. You may have teachings within Tibetan Buddhism, and we don't in Druidry, but we have our own internal moral compass. So we take responsibility. You mentioned karma, acknowledging the law of the harvest, you know, what we sow, we shall reap. One thing that I haven't mentioned yet, and which is really, really important, is a love of nature. And I think we honor that blessing I did was the blessings of earth, sky, and sea. Those 3 realms are very, very important. And how it's not about us as humans minding nature. We are nature. We are part of that web. We are so interconnected. And when we have that strong sense of interconnectedness, if we really know it, we're less likely to do damage. It's when we don't know it or not aware of it. Would you like to speak a little bit to that?
Thank you. Yes, when we talk about nature, and again we come to the idea of micro and microcosmos, the inner nature and the outer nature, and the link between them are the elements. So this is also consists in the system of color chakra. We speak about 5 elements, which we have it in our body, like earth, water, fire, air, and space, and we have them also in the outside world, and we aim to balance them through our practice, daily practice. And we can do this, for example, with hanging prayer flags, which consist of 5 colors related with the 5 elements. We can do it simply through our yogic practice, through visualization of the elements and colors, and mantra, like a bija mantra, the seed syllable. There are variety of practice that we can use to balance these elements and to pay homage to the to the earth, to the nature in us and the nature outside. Therefore, also we speak about Kala Chakra in terms of three main aspects. Outer, this is the whole nature environment, including the cosmic cycles, the astrologic, astronomy, and so on. It's a vast, huge system. And we talk about inner Kala Chakra, the physical body, the medicine, including the medicine, traditional medicine, and the inner channels and energetic centers, the chakras, and so on, and how to use them. And we talk about alternative Kala Chakra, which is the way we combine them and transcend them in order to attain the physical and spiritual goal.
Beautiful. And of course, this session is how is it? How does it inform our roles in the modern world? And I suppose one thing is around. As Druids, we look to the landscape for awan or imas, we call it, inspiration, divine illumination. There's an expression in Irish called Eish le glór agus yoi tu mian or yoi tu bradon. Listen to the voice of the water and you will get wisdom. Well, bradon is a salmon, but it's an emblem of it symbolizes wisdom, and that we can learn so much when we listen to the landscape. And you know, what can we do in the modern world about the state of the world? I think if we can listen to it, I think it's a very, very important one. And recognizing, and I think was it Ramji yesterday talked about the divinity in all things. He was even talking about the divinity in his laptop. But that recognizing the divinity and the sacredness and everything around us, and that is something we can do in the modern world. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely, absolutely agree. And I just remember something that you mentioned, and I didn't continue the idea of interdependence. So one way is to pay homage to the nature, the landscape, and the people around us. But another way, which is also very essential in Buddhism as a whole, is to analyze, to understand the deep root of interdependence, our connection with all beings, sentient beings, the one that have heart and consciousness. And once we understand deeply this connection, we naturally develop this compassion and love. So this is another thing that we can contribute, preserving the ancient tradition of Buddhist knowledge, is to understand, it's called tendrel in Tibetan, interdependence between all phenomena, inner and outer, and also between all human beings. So understanding that in the countless rebirth, anybody, you can be my mother or my guide or my guru, my teacher, or my enemy. But we try to overcome during all these endless rebirths. We try to grow, to elevate our consciousness, to go to transcendent our low human understanding, and to cultivate, develop the qualities that we need in this world, like love, compassion, and kindness, and wisdom, and so on.
And I think linked into that is trust and abundance. We have an Irish word for that called flourish. So our hunter-gatherer, well, our still hunter-gatherer people still living today, ancestors, believe that the mother will provide, that all that we have is here, that nature will provide, and that they trust in that and trust in their landscape, that they have enough. Now, I know we can't, I'm not suggesting we go back and live as hunter-gatherers, but if we have that sense of abundance within, that there is enough for us, we are enough, because a lack of trust or a lack of a sense of abundance results in destruction. And you can see this pursuit of money or materialism in order to fill some kind of gap. It's not working. And, you know, we all have a gift to offer, and it's to be able to recognize what our purpose is for ourselves, but also for the community in which we live. You know, that notion that a community is only as good as the individuals that are in it. So that you have, it's not about let's only look at the collective or let's only look at the individual. It's around taking care of the needs of both. And I think there's space for that. And also, and there's also this diversity. I mean, this conference just shows the magic in diversity. We have an expression, Eintocht and Iliacht, unity and diversity. And I think that's just fascinating how we're so different with different colors and textures, but the values that we share. And there's something is with this conversation around world climate, what is it we're paying attention to? It can be very gloomy. And I know as a psychologist, I work in a solution-focused way. And it's around not just focusing on the problem with deficits and all that's going wrong, is to be able to have a strengths-based approach, recognizing and acknowledging our strengths, because that's from that place is where we move forward. So if we have a sense of my inner peace, I have a sense of inner abundance. And from there, what are my strengths and what are the strengths of our community? And from there, we can find ways of moving forward. I wonder, is there anything you could...
Beautiful. Yeah, I can make one link. It sounds different, but it's very strongly related. This is, again, the karma itself. What Buddhists are rely and just surrender to it is the understanding of karma, which is also our responsibility. And it can be abundance. The root why this happens or it doesn't happen to us is because of karma. Whatever we have accumulated before in this life or in the previous lives. Also, when we talk about our personal karma, of course, we talk about the karma of the humanity, of the people. And if we are able to understand whatever happens with the law of cause and effect, so yeah, we can say, even though it sounds sad, but maybe the reason for pandemic is the karma of the human beings or something that we have made in not a good way, but also it comes to teach us, to help us to see a light in the tunnel. So there can be many different ideas in which can help us to stop, to look around, and to take and to transform the challenges or the problems or the negativities into a path, into a spiritual growth. And sometimes we need key words. For example, in Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, we talk about Tsemeshi, the four immeasurables, because they are, you cannot compare, they're huge and vast, and they are for all. And they are very, very simple words. Love, Jampa, or loving kindness, compassion, Ninje, joy, Kawa, and equanimity, Tanyam.
Beautiful. And how easy in this world is it in these times now to hold those, do you think? Or how can somebody in this, how can we do that now?
I think, for example, conference such this, it can really, really awake, enlighten us, and give us like 1 weekend, 2 days to think, to feel inspired, to remember what is really, really meaningful, what helps to our heart to be full of love, inspiration, and kindness. And again, we're coming back to the daily practice, the rituals, which means to be reunited with the source, with the divine. Every small thing that we perform when we wake up or before going to sleep in our daily life, we can light incense or candle or just hug our beloved child, for example. But when we do it with dedication for the happiness of all beings, with love and pure peace in our heart, it works, it contributes.
I think so. And I like that it's the smallest things. It's not the big things, that all these small things are incremental. And when we look at the smallest thing we can do, then it's possible. When we look at the big thing, we can become powerless and helpless and hopeless. So it's these small, simple acts that I think that are really, really important. And I was thinking of conversation, which is what we're having now. And we have these conversations at these conferences. And it's conversations in our ordinary everyday lives that I think are really, really important. and how we share these.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, I mentioned child hug, the way we teach our children through example, the way we educate ours whenever we have this responsibility to do so. So yeah, and the way we are open to learn.
Yes, and you said, hugging. I can hug my daughter because she lives with me, and I can't hug anybody else in this pandemic, which is really, really difficult. So, and the power of a hug and the power of physical touch is just it's one of those what is it, immeasurables or unmeasurables you mentioned, that I look forward to the time when we can hug. There's also what I like as a storyteller, that stories can be really, really useful to incorporate those values from ancient times, which are now, into the present day. And we can make relevant old stories. And I think something about the old stories is that they're universal, or can be, and that they have a relevance regardless, no matter how old they are. They have a long shelf life, that they have a relevance, and people are fascinated with stories because the stories can take us out of ourselves into giving us another perspective in order to come back and see the world in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Ema and Lyudmila. We do have a couple of questions we're trying to squeeze in before the end of the session. Obviously, time has clearly flown by. So one of the questions I've got here: what's the main difference between Indian and Tibetan Buddhism? That'll be for you, Lyudmila.
Yes. Yes. So when we talk, I will try to explain briefly. In different lineage in Buddhism, we talk about Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana Buddhism. So Theravada is mostly related with the classical Buddhism, and it is spread in South Asia, and of course including India. For example, Mahayana is related with East Asia, and Vajrayana with the Himalayan region, with northern India, Tibet, Bhutan, Mongolia, and so on and so on. So when we talk about Indian Buddhism, this is the classical Buddhism, with a very strict system of monks' life, and relying on the teachings of Buddha himself, and chanting the sutras. And when we talk about Tibetan Buddhism, or Vajrayana, or Himalayan Buddhism, the main essence is the practice itself, and the connection relying on the guru or lama in the Tibetan systems. So it uses powerful tantric systems. So it's a tantric Buddhism, which means it uses also rituals and yogic practice, including like practice with physical union between man and woman, and so on and so on. So there are many differences, in fact, but the common thing is they all come from the Shakyamuni.
Great, thank you for that quick explanation. Now, Ema, and I'll get to this question, probably both of you. So one of the questions is: when do you feel is the best time of day to meditate, or do you have no preference? I mean, sure, meditation is probably quite important in both traditions. Do you have a preference, or would you say there's a preferred time at all? Ema, to you?
I'll do it in the morning, but not early morning. I'm not an early person, so I will do it, you say, mid-morning, so that I'm awake. I don't know if the question is when is the best time for anybody to do it. I think the best time for anyone to do it is when you know yourself, your own clock. Some people do it in the evening. It all depends on what suits you. I'm a night owl, so don't get me up early in the morning.
And I guess there's various ways as well, because I know some people like to meditate whilst walking, etc. I mean, is there certain practices you would promote like that, or you think has benefited you?
Well, I'm a walker, and I love the woods. So I will sit quietly and meditate. When I wake up, I ease my soul in to it's prayers, I say, rather than meditate, to wake myself, to kind of get myself ready for the day. My preference is the woods, the trees, and I can listen to them and walk and feel the earth beneath me, and I find that very, very powerful. It's also very cleansing and very, very healing.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. So we have come to the end of our session, and we would love to ask you a few more questions afterwards. I'm sure people will be posting on the app, so I hope both of you are there and you could potentially answer any questions that come about. It was a really lively discussion, really insightful, so thank you both, Ima and Lyudmila, for your time today.
Thank you.
So,
it was lovely to be invited, and lovely talking to you, Lyudmila.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we are going over to a short break, just a couple of minutes. So grab yourself a cup of tea, because we have a very interesting panel discussion coming up for you next. Thank you. Welcome back from the break and to our 7th International Conference and Gathering of Elders. It is day 2, and we've, as you probably saw earlier, we had a wonderful discussion between Ima and Lyudmila, and now we're going to go over to a panel discussion. So before that, again, just wanted to highlight, I mean, one of the lovely things about conferences is actually meeting people, new people, old faces as well. And obviously, while as we are live on air, as we are using technology this time round, and it's a virtual conference, we still want to provide that the opportunity to connect with others. So I would encourage, it would be fantastic to see some of you on our Whoolley app. And because we're having a lot of panel discussions today, it might not be always possible to answer all your questions, or it might be an opportunity for you to ask the question to other fellow participants. So it's a really engaging way. So please do jump on, submit your questions to the speakers, or even start a discussion with each other. So please do join that. Now, coming up next is a panel discussion on sustainable living. This session will be chaired by Dr. Sachin Nandha. Sachin has an undergraduate in engineering and is a postgraduate of philosophy. He has written and published several academic papers around identity, Christian and Islamic theology, and liberty. In a professional capacity, he is the chief executive of a private equity fund dedicated to healthcare. He is also national coordinator for Vijarmantan UK, a platform for earnest thinkers to engage in dialogue on issues that affect British society through a Hindu civilizational lens. He's also got a leading role in the ICCS team. So without further ado, let me pass you over to Sachin.
Namaste. Thank you so much, Falguni-ji. It's a real pleasure to be able to chair and moderate this panel on sustainable living, a deep dive. And you know, as Falguni rightly said, you know, my view on this is that I want to get straight into it, and it's a deep dive, albeit in just 1 hour. And so when we talk about sustainable living, I want to be able to explore with some great, fantastic panelists who will be joining me. What does sustainability actually mean in some deeper sense? And also, you know, to what extent does living mean? So when we talk about sustainable living and we merge those two concepts up, well, what do we actually mean by that? So can we get straight into that? So I've got 4 wonderful panelists who will be joining me. First is we've got Marko Hren from Slovenia. Marko is the founder and director of the Peace Institute and works with the government of Slovenia's development and European cohesion policy. Marko, welcome. Next, we have Inija Trinkūnienė from Lithuania. Inija is the chief priestess of the remover culture and tradition of Lithuania. Now, Inija, even though from Lithuania today, joins us all the way from the beautiful islands of Gran Canaria. So Inija, welcome, and thank you for joining the panel. Wonderful to see you. Fine, and next we have Kristoffer Hughes. Kristoffer is the chief of the Anglesey Druid Order in the United Kingdom, and he's also an award-winning author. So Kristoffer, welcome to the panel and thank you for joining us. And last but not least, we have a very special guest from Siddartha Krishnaji. So Siddartha-ji is a deep practitioner of Hindu philosophy and was educated at the Kailas Ashram, which is a monastic education institution teaching Vedanta. Today, he teaches Sanskrit and is a teacher of Sanskrit and Vedanta philosophy. So Siddartha-ji, welcome.
Thank you very much, Sachin-ji. Thank you very
Wonderful.
much.
So what we're going to do with all of our panelists is one by one, I shall be asking them with their opening remarks. And after those opening remarks, they will have 5 minutes each. And the house rules will be that after 5 minutes, we will listen to the next expert witness. And then we will have a Q&A amongst ourselves. And then we'll open it up to the audience. So I will be coming to you for all of you listeners who are listening to this panel from all over the world. And I know we've had a fantastic response from people across the world listening in on this. So please do submit your questions on your app. And we have a questions moderator who will be in touch with you and they will be channeling the questions to me. Please also, if you want to ask a question to a specific expert witness, please do put their name in, then I'll know who to channel that question to. So without further ado, I want to open this up with Siddartha-ji Krishna. Siddartha-ji, welcome. Siddartha-ji, I want to open up this discussion with a 5 minutes opening remark from yourself. And really, from a Hindu Dharma perspective, tell us a little bit, if you can, and as deeply as you can, I suppose, in the time given, what would you mean, what ought we mean by the term sustainability?
Thank you very much, Sachin Bhai. I will spend a few minutes explaining sustainability in the light of Dharma. In the Vedic understanding, we all are seen as children of the realm of light, manifested as the sun and referred to in the Vedas as Dyaushpita, the father, the realm of light, and Mother Earth, Bhumihi Mata, Mother Earth. The idea is that life on earth is created as the light from the sun impregnates the Mother Earth. These two not only create life, but also sustain it. And at the end, all life merges back into them. Now, the simple question that we need to ask is, are we content with the milk provided, with the life-giving milk provided by the Mother Earth, or are we sucking out in greed the very blood out of her heart? We can do the second, which sometimes it seems that we are doing, but then we will be behaving like a parasite, which dies itself after it has killed its host. So to avoid this, one of the ideas that we find, for example, in the Upanishads is that we need to cultivate the capacity to always choose between what is pleasant and what is beneficial, because these two constantly present themselves in life. But this requires some inner power to choose the pleasant over the beneficial. And thus today, I would say the entire humanity faces this notorious problem that Duryodhana at the time of the Mahabharata had, the evil character of the Mahabharata. I know what is the right thing to do, but I'm unable to engage myself in that. I know what is unwholesome for me, what is harmful for me, but I'm unable to pull myself back from it. Some people need external force, but that is not the solution. The solution that the Vedic masters searched for was to gain inner strength, inner power. First of all, the inner light to carefully discriminate between what is only pleasant but is not beneficial, and that which is pleasant as well as beneficial. First of all, to be able to discriminate between both, and then the capacity to actually choose and engage in that. That is where then yoga really comes into the picture as the whole system. When the masters say, Nasti yoga samam balam, there is no strength equal to the strength that one derives from within through the practice of yoga. So when it comes to living a sustainable life, which means that we live by the fundamental yogic principles of accumulating only absolutely necessary possessions, which is the fifth yama, and the second niyama, which is contentment or a sense of gratitude and thankfulness towards whatever we have. Unless we do this, we are bound to become such parasites. So when it comes as part of sustainable living, there are so many yogic principles, such as one of them that I can immediately think of, and we need really immediately something to do about it is, for example, food wastage. In the part of the world where I grew up, food is seen as a manifestation of the divine, as the sustaining principle of the divine, because it sustains life. And that's why tremendous respect for food is inculcated. And leaving behind even a grain was considered like a sin. Eat tons, my teachers used to say, eat tons, but don't leave behind even a grain. That was their clarion call. So like this, one can go deeper and deeper into different aspects. But just to summarize that, until we instill these values back into the society and inculcate them into the future generations, I'm sad to say, but I see a very bleak and dark future, not only for us as a country, but for the entire humanity. If you value these noble principles, then how can you kill insects through pesticides? How can you blindly cut trees to construct roads? And how can you contaminate the environment of the Mother Earth in the name of modern development? Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not against modern development. The only thing that I'm against is development fueled by greed, not if guided by loving kindness and compassion for humanity and for all living beings. Only such kind of development will be truly sustainable. Be frugal, not extravagant. Start with the practice of frugality at home. This is, I think, to summarize the very basic principles of sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Siddartha. There's some really strong opening statements there that you've made, and there's certainly some notes I've made that I would love to come back to you in our Q&A section in a moment. The next person I would like to kind of bring on and kind of reflect on some of the things that Siddartha's already said, but also to engage from one's own tradition. Kristoffer Hughes, if I could come to you next, the Druid order, and of course you're based out on the sacred island of Anglesey. The Druid order is also a nature-based tradition. It's a very old tradition. You know, I suppose from your perspective, when we talk about sustainability, again, a similar angle, I suppose, is we all know that for example, you know, I ought to consume less. I ought to, you know, restrain one's passions, if I can say it that way, and be more conscious of what one is devouring. But from a Druid sense, if you could tell us from your perspective what sustainability means, but also if you can also reflect, just like Siddartha did, on almost like a telos of living. What is the purpose? So that balance of progress and sustainability. So if you could give us your opening remarks on that. Thank you.
Diolch, Sachin. Croeso I chi gyd yma I Ynys Môn. Fi yw pennaeth Urdd Derwyddon Môn. Blessings and greetings to you all from the sacred island of Anglesey here in North Wales. At the very heart of the Druid spiritual principle is the concept of awen, a small word that packs quite a punch. Now, the word awen essentially describes blessed or holy breath, and that essentially we as human beings and all other expressions of life here on our glorious blue planet are the breath of the universe itself, singing in praise of itself with no separation. The awen sings inwardly of the universe, and it sings outwardly with that creative expression. The awen blows through the Druid and blows through the world to cause change by the power of inspiration. However, it can be said that we live in a somewhat uninspired time, in an age that has become increasingly disenchanted. And it is essentially up to those who are inspired by the unseen forces of the universe to reignite the flame of awen, to reignite the fires of inspiration. For it is only by the power of inspiration that we are able to cause great change in our world. Now, we can become somewhat overwhelmed by the complexities and the enormities of the world at large, causing us to feel disempowered and so overwhelmed that we might just take to hiding under our duvets, unable to know, unable to fathom what on earth we can do as individuals to reignite the flames and the passions of inspiration. For without inspiration, there can be no change. Think, if you will, of the actions of human beings on this planet. It is not too dissimilar to what is happening within human society currently. In the midst of a global pandemic, we are all at the mercy of an organism that is opportunistic. It seeks to colonize, and when it colonizes, it consumes all of its resources. And in the process of consuming those resources, it hinders, destroys the host. Does that sound familiar as an allegory for another organism that lives on planet Earth? It does. Human beings and the coronavirus are essentially not that different in behavior or expression. We act very similarly. So what can we do, and what is sustainable living, and how does that impact a druid and the impact of that druid on the world itself? Now, within Welsh Druidry, within the Welsh Druid tradition, we are not solely identified as a nature-based religion. A nature-based element of our spirituality is an aspect of our spirituality, but there is so much more. For sustainability doesn't just limit itself to the fundamental principles of environmentalism or ecology. We are also talking about sustainability in the Druid tradition that applies as guardians of culture, the sustainability of culture, the sustainability of wisdom, the sustainability of knowledge, the sustainability of magical tradition, and also the sustainability of the trees as our allies. Consider the name Druid itself. In my own native language, the term is derwydd, which means to know the oak. To know the oak. Isn't that beautiful? To not only be allies of the trees, but to understand that the trees are our teachers. So what do they teach us? How can they teach us to not feel so disenchanted, to not feel so uninspired when the world seems to be going crazy and mad around us? The trees teach us a valuable lesson. They teach us to focus on our square miles, lest we become so overwhelmed that our actions become inconsequential. And by focusing on just your square mile, you break the world up into a tiny bite-sized piece that you can influence, that you can inspire. But consider also the worldwide web of a forest, a fungal network that connects every single tree to every other tree in a forest. They can send signals of communication from one end of a forest to another. We do exactly the same in the human world. And by focusing on what we can do to change our square mile, we create a network of inspiration, that your actions inspire your neighbor's actions. Your neighbor inspires another person's actions. When we act locally, we essentially influence globally. It might take some time, but it causes us to be productive and effective in methods of inspiration that cause great change in the world. When I look at some of the statistics as to what is happening in the world, they consider that transport will have tripled by 2070, with a global rise of possibly 8 to 9 billion people on our planet by 2070. That is enormous. And if we think on those global issues, we will become overwhelmed. But the Druid asks you, think of a tree and its roots in your land. Eat locally, act locally, influence globally. Change little tiny bits of your behavior that influence your square mile. And eventually we create what I somewhat flippantly might call a Druid transmitted infection. And that infection is inspiration, is awen. So let the breath of that blow through you. And we have a tenet in Welsh Druidry. The tenet is this: y gwir yn erbyn y byd, the truth against the world, a oes heddwch, is there, do you bring peace? Galon wrth galon, heart to heart, a oes heddwch, will you and can you bring peace? Gwaedd uwch adwaith, a oes heddwch, shout above resounding shout, will you and can you bring peace? The truth against the world. Your heart with my heart, all of that love. That's how we can make a difference. Shout above resounding shout. When voices are shouting at you, shout louder, make yourself heard. Let your inspiration be heard. Heddwch, hedd, is our adjective for peace, but the uch sound at the end turns it into a verb. It turns it into something that we do. In order to not be overwhelmed, think of that tree in your garden, in your park, in your local wood. Think of its roots deep in the soft brown soil, its trunk here in the apparent world, and its branches reaching out in expression.
Wonderful.
You be that tree.
No, wonderful. Quick,
The
Kristoffer, just there, just if I can get you just to wrap up your thoughts.
That was it. That was it. That was literally
wonderful.
You can be that tree. You can be the awen. You can be.
There's a lot of thoughts there. Again, I've captured quite a lot. I'd love to explore some of these themes a little bit further, especially around this inspiration when we come to the Q&A. So thank you very, very much. Our next expert witness, Marko Hren, is from Slovenia. Marko, particularly interested in your experiences. We're talking about sustainability, and you've heard our other two expert witnesses. From your perspective, you've traveled extensively Europe, but also India, and I'd like to hear some of your thoughts around our challenges and also, what does sustainability really mean for our planet?
Thank you, Sachin. Namaste. Dobar dan, everyone, and hello. It's a pleasure to speak in a row of Siddartha, Kristoffer, and yourself. So I'm looking forward to the debate. Concerning the etymologies, we'll have a lot of synchronicities with Siddartha and Kristoffer. I will start with explaining the reasons for non-sustainable behavior patterns on the planet, since we all agree that traditional societies were having built-in cosmologies to sustain their life within communities and their habitat. We do not need to discuss that. But we need to discuss why the culture became a culture of greed, why the culture became predominantly a predator culture, as my colleague, recently deceased academic Zmago Schmidt put right. Man did not spiritually evolve much from Stone Age hunter. On contrary, we are in recession concerning the spirituality growth. And that's where the potential of traditional schools of wisdom stand, to awaken the ancient wisdom concerning the oneness of life. The predator's culture is key for non-sustainable patterns, and for domination of predator's culture, the key thing was the removal of ancient schools of wisdom. That is key for sustainable development creation on the planet, awakening of ancient schools of wisdom. And this was done by colonial powers on purpose. This was done on purpose so that enslaved populations would rob their own resources and their own land. So the reversal of the trend of spiritual regression is in a way a must. What we have now after centuries of cleansing of all traditional spiritualities practically on the planet are fragments. We have heard much about that yesterday, about sources. We possess, particularly in Europe, speaking for Europe, we possess fragments of etymologies, of language, of shrines, descriptions of rituals, etc. What we need is a good exchange of practices. And you asked me about my comparative view on travel. I can offer you diverse examples of unity in terms of linguistics. Before we start, we exchange with Siddartha the wording of Upasana, which is my cosmological society, registered under the law of religious freedom in Slovenia, and I speak on behalf of this union of elders, and on behalf of the Association of Slovene Nature-Centered Faith. We explore the fragments of our spiritual heritage, which is extremely rich. We did not expect such richness of remainders of building blocks of ancient cosmologies, despite of more than millennia of colonial pressure. For example, the breath, Awen, to build on what Kristoffer just said, it's still fresh in my mind. We have breath built in our language as key term for spirituality. Spirituality in my language is outspoken as duchovnost. Duch, dach, dich is breath. Breath is directly a pillar of Slavic spirituality, duch. dich. Why? Because it is a carrier of introspective link with environment, with society and nature. And introspective insight, introspective acquisition of knowledge is key today to come back with sustainable behavior patterns. If you have empathy with environment, if you have contact with environment, you would not harm it. Introspective knowledge is something that disappeared from colonized structures. And
if I can just get you to wrap up.
Yep.
If I can get you to wrap up your initial thoughts.
So in the times, my conclusive statement would be that introspective part of traditional knowledge is also key to compensate for the damage that can potentially be done with mega trends of digitalization and artificial intelligence. We haven't been hearing much about this momentum that can further alienate societies from nature, but it is important. But there is an answer to that. The answer to that.
Hopefully, Marko, I want to pick some of that up in the Q&A. Some of those thoughts there. I just want to bring in our final expert witness from Lithuania, who of course is in Gran Canaria at the moment. Inija, welcome. Inija, you've heard our other speakers talk quite articulately about what they mean by sustainability, and you know, I would like to now hear from the remover perspective. Again, a very old tradition. In fact, remover, the one thing that I found fascinating about when visiting Vilnius is that the Lithuanian folklore culture is still very mainstream. And so the memories of that ancient past are still very, very alive in Lithuania, I find. So from your perspective, tell us in a few minutes what you think sustainability means, and reflect on some of the things that you've heard from our speakers.
Thank you, Sachin. So today I'd like to share with you the knowledge of our ancestors. It is the knowledge going back thousands of years and still alive in our lives and hearts. I'd like to underline the importance of two main principles of Romuva, which are the sacredness of nature and principle of harmony. We call it Dharna. So the first one, nature is sacred, and sacredness is the most perfect characteristic of life. It unites everything. Lithuanians consider their homes sacred. Holy are the rivers, springs, trees, stones, hills, groves, and other objects of nature. The mysterious creative strength is personified so that through visible feeling and understanding, it shapes man to draw him nearer to divinity. Highly eloquent is a very old Baltic word, šventas, in English holy, related with the Indo-European hoento, which means a vital force, or that which extends, grows, and strengthens. Several hundred places named with the word šventas, holy, are known in Lithuania. Our ancestors saw that force, sacredness, šventas, in the surrounding world. They saw it not only in celestial bodies, but also on the earth, plants, trees, springs, stones. So the semantic analysis of the text of Lithuanian chants has shown the existing widely expressed parallels between the life of human beings and nature. Both nature and human personalities are perceived of equal importance. And I want to share with you the example of Vedic song, which we are singing during our wedding rituals. Falcon and the cuckoo are together. They had flew into the garden. They perched on the branch. They drank the dew from a leaf. They picked the berries from the olive bush. The bride and groom are together. They rode into the manor. They sat down on the bench. They drank meat from the only ladle, and they tasted honey from the only spoon. So I think that when we meet alone, I'll sing the song for you. So the next thing what I want to share with you is Dharna, the rule of harmony. Dharna has always been of significance in Romova faith. It lies in origins of Baltic culture. Man lives and the world coexist due to harmonious interactions rudimentary to life and through man's own correct and moral behavior. Such opposites like light, darkness, fire, water, hot and cold, and others do not necessarily imply a good-evil relationship. These opposite pairs are not static. They not only interact, but also change and grow. From the human standpoint, they are neither absolutely good nor absolutely evil, gods and goddesses. Goodness is born from interaction of differing, but not of hostile forces, with man's interactive participation. Evil is harmony's downfall, the absence of or inability to restore harmony. This is most evident in nature's devastation, man's activity against nature and her order.
Wonderful.
So, Dharna, harmony, is the most important nature's and man's ideals attained and maintained with constant work and toil. And Baltic Dharna, harmony, is very close to Hindu Dharma, the principle of moral order of the world.
Wonderful. Inija, that was superb. In fact, what I want to do on that, and this is why I held you back a little bit, because you just nicely stitched everything that we've all been discussing up very nicely. So if I can bring all my panelists back on for this discussion, I want to ask you a question, which is kind of for all of you, but you know, let's play it before we go to the audience Q&A. We've got quite a few questions coming our way through the chat channels. But just let's get going. So a couple of things I want to pick up. Siddartha-ji, you mentioned and you gave us the first sort of, if I can say, dichotomy, or maybe not be a dichotomy, but that which is pleasant and that which is beneficial. Shreya Preya, right? I sense that. And then what's interesting is straight after that, you know, we heard about the idea of inspiration and how it's inspiration that is the catalyst of change. So if we want to create a sustainable society, we need to be able to discriminate between that which is pleasant and beneficial, and then have inspiration. What was interesting was both of you alluded to this notion of the parasitic mind, the notion that actually somehow humanity has regressed. And I think Inija and Marko alluded to these exact points where it seems like whether it's colonialization, whether it's industrialization or mechanization, it seems that humanity has pursued the pleasant over necessarily the beneficial. Maybe, and that's for you to, you know, polish up if I'm wrong. The other thing, of course, is rightly so. Again, we talked about, Kristoffer, you mentioned wisdom and Arwen. Again, the idea of blessed or holy breath in sync with inspiration. You talked about focusing local and having almost in some sense shraddha or faith in that you are making a global impact. And so I want to also kind of come into this final point about knowing what Inija has said between sacredness and harmony, and in particular, that sometimes opposites are not good and evil. They're not good and bad, but they somehow cause a change. They churn, and that happens. So I suppose my question for all of us here, before I go to the audience, is, having heard what we've just heard, practically, a few minutes each, if I may, just a few minutes, practically, how do we instill this ability to discriminate between the beneficial and pleasant? How do we get humanity to understand the idea of rekindling wisdom rather than just intelligence? And then this notion of sacredness. How do we bring sacredness in our lives? In fact, the secular world has done nothing but remove the sacred from our lives. So how do we do this? So I want you to tell me in a few moments from each of your perspectives, the how. Can I start with Marko? Tell me in a few minutes, Marko, the how. And of course, guys, at any stage, if you want to jump in, just raise your hand or just jump in, and it's a conversation we can have now. So Marko, over to you.
So in my view, we need to revolutionize our spiritualities. We need to discuss spirituality in public, and we need to revolutionize that. To build on what was said today, for example, in my country, we also use the word sveto, shvento. We use the same word for sacred. And the unity between micro and macro is already in the language there. We use the word shvento, svet, for the world as a whole, for macro, and for the land we use. In most of Slovene region, when you talk about the land in the village around your household, you say sveto. Many toponyms, many names of villages are sveto, shvento. So this unity of micro and macro is built in the language. What we need to do is revolutionize the understanding of our language, of our codes. For example, the word inspiration, Siddartha, in Slovene is directly linked to breath, to dich, to duch. It's navdich, navduch, no duch, new breath. Inspiration in Slovene is new breath. So we need to teach people. We need to teach people that they have all tools in their cradle.
Yes, wonderful. Inija, you wanted to say something?
Yes, just to say that in Lithuania the same. Inspiration is to take breaths. It's the same.
Right. Kristoffer, one of the things that you talked about was the sustainability of wisdom and focusing on the local. That was something you said. The reality is that it seems to me that a lot of people are alienated because we are urbanized, right? And there's a wonderful saying, and I can't remember who said it, but it goes something like this: until we reconnect the urban with the rural, we can't change anything. The question is having human beings like living in cities, and cities are not going to go anywhere soon, right? So how do we bring nature and the rural into our cities? How do we do that?
I'm not entirely sure whether it's how we bring nature into those people's lives, but rather a change and a shift in perspective. When something is mundane or something is profane, we use it as we would a tool. However, when something is sacred, it tells us what to do. It informs us how to work in relationship with it. So I think a lot is based on the fact that our intelligence doesn't necessarily equate to wisdom. So therefore, we must approach this entire sustainability issue from a different perspective, a perspective of profound wisdom, and helping people understand what that means. And if you would just consider what's happened during the pandemic, that 14% of global emissions comes from transportation, 3/4 of that comes from road travel, which here in the United Kingdom has been severely decreased because of global pandemic situation and lockdown. So we're all working from home. We're imbibing a different form of wisdom. People are coming to the realization that there is something else out there, something cysagredig, as we would say in Welsh, something sacred, and that sacred and sanctity comes from the fact that all we've been doing is using, taking, consuming, devouring, eating, and spitting out waste at the other side. Whereas actually, if we have a shift in perspective, and the global pandemic has caused a shift, and I hope that we as spiritual leaders from ancient cultures and traditions can turn the conversation around so that people perceive the sacred and are able to move into a different relationship with that which is sacred. Because ultimately, for the majority of people who live on the planet, their relationship with the world around them is as a form of mundanity, and modernity has caused that to proliferate. Whereas if we help people understand what is sacred, we start a shift, and that shift is inspiration.
Wonderful. Okay, right. So let me just go a little bit further. So Siddartha, I'll come to you a little bit. You mentioned the pleasant and the beneficial. It seems to me, and kind of, let me just be the kind of advocate here. We are all on this wonderful technology, right? Look at the benefits we have from technology. It's beneficial, 100% beneficial. But maybe to get here, to kind of have this scientific revolution, this scientific age, what we've ended up doing is practicing and applying a reductionist form of thinking, if I may frame it like that. Now, it seems to me that we have pursued at the same time things that are beneficial, like this, but also we want everything to be pleasant simultaneously. And if something is just beneficial, we seem to reject it. But if something is beneficial and pleasant, then we accept it. And if something is just pleasant and it's not beneficial, we still accept it. In fact, we accept it even more earnestly. I want to know, look, individually, yes, okay, you can inspire me today, and maybe there are 700 people that have registered for this conference. They'll watch this video, and maybe some of them will be inspired. But I want to know, is it really possible to inspire a population to start thinking about this notion of beneficial and pleasantness, in a way that makes a significant difference? Is that possible, or are we really talking about lights, just keeping the flames alive of some of these wisdoms? Could you reflect on that for me?
Yes, thank you very much. What I think is that, yoga is already spreading, for example, all around the world. And ultimately, it's not only about sustaining the earth, but it's about sustaining ourselves. The kind of life that we have been living, we are not only exhausting Mother Nature, Mother Earth, but we are in fact exhausting ourselves. And so there is this tremendous interest in practices such as yoga, in practices such as meditation, which, by the way, for me, yoga means three things: postures, mindful breathing, as well as meditation or mindfulness. All these three things I combine under yoga. And when we go deeper into the yogic teachings, and we see that, for example, there is this, the idea of having a grander perspective. Dirgham pashyata mahraswam. Look at the grander perspective, not from a small perspective. So we can say long-term planning, or the courage to practice long-term thinking and to make bold, courageous, anticipatory decisions at a time when problems have become perceptible, but before they have reached crisis proportions. So when such thinking, such teachings, and then other teachings of Atma Manthana, I know you have this platform, Vichara Manthana, but then the idea of Atma Manthana, willingness to reconsider our core values, sometimes to inculcate the courage to make painful decisions about values. Which of the values that formerly served a society well can continue to be maintained under new changed circumstances, and which of these treasured values must now be jettisoned and replaced with different approaches. Such type of questions have to be asked collectively. It's not for one person, one community, or one nation to make these decisions, but we have to sit together and talk about these issues. And I think the last thing that really, in fact, the dharmic teachings such as non-violence or vegetarianism come in the context of sustainability. They came into existence in the context of sustainability. There is a very interesting book, The Fissured Land, An Ecological History of India, which makes this case that these strong ideas of non-violence and vegetarianism, they came because it was the need of time.
Right, and this kind of goes to that churning that Inija was talking about, that sometimes opposites can churn and create something positive.
And I would like to add that meditation, dhyana nirmatana bhyasat, the Upanishads, when they describe meditation, they describe it as a kind of churning between evil, so-called evil or unwholesome, as well as wholesome forces. And that's where what Inija brought in the point that even evil forces or unwholesome forces become meaningful because it is against the pull of that we evolve ourselves, that we develop ourselves. So they have a place there.
Wonderful. Okay, and so I'm conscious of time, and as always, it catches up on us, right? It catches up on us. So Inija, one of the things that I want to ask you before we kind of wrap this session up is, one of the questions we've got coming through from a Pete Jennings is, so he asks, is it really possible to be more sustainable within our present political big business culture? Now, so effectively what he's saying is, we have a superstructure whereby there are big businesses, big industries, a lot of money at stake, and we are talking about localism, we're talking about spirituality and inspiration and meditation. Let me just get you to answer it from a particular angle, though, and hopefully it'll answer Pete's question as well, which is the remover culture tradition is a vibrant tradition within Lithuania. How have you, as in the remover movement, the reawakening of the population, influenced in real world terms, business or governance, or is there anything that you have influenced locally that you feel actually, look, ancient wisdoms, ancient values can be institutionalized? They can. Have you got examples you can share with us that you've done in Lithuania?
Yes, thank you for the question.
And of course, I asked all of that only to answer it in a few minutes.
Yes, look, it's too complicated question. Actually, thank you for it, but I think that it's question for all the conference, But for my point of view, I just want to say that Lithuanians feels this closest to nature, and for instance, now we have a movement to protect trees, to protect ancient trees, both in towns and both in local areas. So we can feel that vibrant power of the Mother Earth. And and even doesn't matter what religion it follows. It doesn't matter, but people feel this, this closest to nature and the sacredness of nature. And what positive this COVID situation had done, that people starting by more going to changing their places of living. They are going from the town outside. They are buying some small houses, and we are happy in Lithuania that we have very green and a lot of places to stay. So, and very good internet, by the way, everywhere. So I just, for me, it's to answer direct to your question needs to, sit and to listen again to all you guys have said and to all conference and so on. I think that it's the task for us all.
Wonderful.
For future.
Thank you. And look, the real engineers of this conference and the change drivers are right now on my case, whipping me on my back, saying time. So what I'm going to do is just to reflect a little bit. So rather than saying, can we all have a couple of minutes to give our final message? What I want to do is something a little different, maybe just for time's sake. One thing is I hope all of you will reconnect individually, because all of you have just said some beautifully profound things and very deep and dense things that needs a lot of unpacking. But that's the nature of this conference. It's dense, it's packed. If I can get each of you in a few words to give the message of the listeners in terms of what they can do tonight, what they could do tomorrow morning to start making some of the psychological shift, whether it's inspiration, whether it's the ability to discriminate between pleasant and beneficial, whether it's about introspection, right? Whether it's about harmonizing and creating the sacred in your environment, whatever it might be, what is something that you could give in a few words, each of you, that our listeners can take away and start practicing, physically start practicing? Marko, just a few words, and then I'll come round.
Well, before I end it with dangers of negative aspects of digital technologies and artificial intelligence, and I will start with positive aspects that everyone can use digital technologies and also artificial intelligence later for valuing concerning the ethical criteria of their consumption patterns. What we do every day is we consume. So particularly urban, we have been touching the urban populations. Through digital technologies, we can increase ethical purchasing substantially, and also shorten the value chains in terms of proximity of domestically produced, for example, agricultural products, etc. So use these technologies to better your performance in terms of harm on the nature.
Fantastic, Marko. Very succinct, and I like that. Very practical. Kristoffer, I'll come to you next.
So, human beings have an inherent blind spot where we can't actually see ourselves. So techniques like meditation, spirituality, and magical practices circumvents that. And essentially, the problem that we're facing as human beings, a problem can't be solved on the same conscious level that it was created upon. So we need a shift where people feel disempowered. They also need to understand and know that it takes one drop of water, one drop, to cause a flood. Just one drop. So whatever you can do, however small you think it is, know this, it isn't small. It is vast, and its potential can be vast. So never be disempowered. Always understand that you have the power to change the world within you, and it must start within you. So change that and allow your spirituality and practices to circumvent the assumed negative blockages within these issues that we all face. You can do it.
Kristoffer, wonderful, really clean and clear again. Inija, same question to you. It's practical things that people could implement now, tonight. What would they be?
Yes, tonight, just go outside, find a tree and hug it. Hug it. It's an ancient habit. Just put your head to tree and hug.
You can see what Marko is doing.
Yes, and you will feel something, some very special feeling. Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Practical, very practical. And finally, Siddartha, something that you think we can do tonight.
After you have hugged the tree, sit down under the tree, Practice boundless loving kindness and boundless compassion, which is, by the way, a practice, Maitri Bhavana as it is called. That is not only the source of immense peace, but the source of immense happiness. The person, Matthew Ricard, who is regarded, if you Google the happiest person on earth, his name comes up. He has done this practice for years and years together.
Wonderful.
Sit under
Wonderful.
the tree and
thank you so much. I feel as if I have done all of you injustice by rushing you throughout this conversation. We have gone really deep, really fast. I want to thank you for joining this panel discussion, and for all of our viewers and listeners, I apologize I couldn't keep them for longer. They are wonderful, wonderful panelists, and I could listen to them all day long. But alas, time is up. I want to thank you for tuning in to this ICCS conference. The next panel discussion is also super interesting. It will start in the next 2 minutes. Once again, thank you all for joining us. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Welcome back. We've had some interesting discussions so far, and I'm sure most of you can connect with what each of the speakers are saying, despite being from a different tradition to yourself. I certainly did. I mean, I loved what Kristoffer Hughes said just in the last panel discussion. Act locally, influence globally, which is kind of what this conference is all about as well. We're getting global inspiration, but we're wanting to act locally and do something for our regions, for our towns, our cities. So definitely could connect with what they were saying. Now, we are approaching fast to our final session of the Europe and Africa regional programme. Remember, this is one of 3 regional or zonal conferences, should I say. We had the Indo-Pacific conference this morning, and we have the Americas conference later on this evening. I don't know how many managed to tune into the programs yesterday, but I was listening to the Latin, the one from the Americas, and I heard a beautiful tribal song from a Latin American tribe, and it was a call for Mother Nature. Absolutely breathtaking. I would definitely suggest you to check it out. You can watch any of our sessions from yesterday via our YouTube channel. Just go to ICCS global page and you should be able to find all the recordings from the past day and even this morning. Don't forget, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel to get updates. Also, you can follow us on Facebook as well. Just look up International Centre for Cultural Studies -ICCS, or just check out our website, www.iccsglobal.org. We now have our final panel discussion for the day, and the title is Future Leaders, How Young People Are Embracing Ancient Wisdom. This session will be chaired by Dr. Akshaya Rajangam. Akshaya is currently one of the vice presidents of the National Hindu Students Forum UK, the largest Hindu student movement outside of India. It was founded 29 years ago. NHSF UK is active in almost half of all the universities in the UK and reaches over 10,000 students annually through its activities. Akshaya is currently a junior doctor based in Midlands, UK, with an interest in medical education. Her passions include Bharatanatyam, which is Indian classical dance, reading and painting. I'd like to pass it over to Akshaya now.
Namaste. It gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you tuned in from across the world to this panel titled Future Leaders, How Young People Are Embracing Ancient Wisdom. Today, we are joined by 4 such youth leaders from across the world who are not just actively practicing their respective traditions, but also are playing an integral role towards the flourishing of these traditions amongst young people today. Before I introduce each of them in turn, I'd like to take a moment to introduce the topic before us today. It is often imagined that wisdom is in the province of the old, but millions of young people all around the globe today are dedicated to embracing, celebrating, and sharing these folk traditions to which they belong to. Along with that, they also take in the values and teachings that these traditions impart. In a rapidly evolving world today, surrounded by technology, social media, and other influences, what is the current landscape amongst our young people in practicing these traditions? What does the future hold? What is our current responsibility as youth leaders today towards that future? I had the privilege of connecting with each of these leaders, and now I'm only more excited to explore their unique experiences with you all today. Over the course of the next hour, we will be exploring the experiences of young people across these traditions through a series of dialogue. There will also be a segment for question and answers from you, our audience. So please do ask any questions that you may have on the chat function on the Hoover app. We will now begin with a short opening statement from each of our panelists in turn. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jonathan Whoolley. Dr. Jonathan Whoolley is tuning in from the UK today. He is a druid and a solitary practitioner of traditional witchcraft. He's one of the Order of Bards, or Waits, in Druids Mount Haemus Scholars, and works with druidic gatherings in Bristol, London, and Oxfordshire. He holds a PhD in social anthropology from the University of Cambridge and has published and lectured widely on nature spirituality in Britain, and is currently working on the world's first academic edited volume on modern Druidry. Welcome, Dr. Jonathan Whoolley. So Jonathan G, my question for you is, what are some of the central ideas in your tradition? And what is the involvement of young people in embracing your tradition today?
Thank you so much, Akshay. It's a real honor to be here today and to be speaking to such an interesting and fascinating topic. You've already heard a great deal from two very respected elders within the Druid community, Emma Burke, who is the head of my order, and Kristoffer Hughes, who is the head of the Anglesey Order of Druids. And both of them have spoken beautifully and eloquently about some of the essential values and virtues that lie at the heart of Druidic teaching. And indeed, it's sort of worth bearing in mind that the goals of Druidry are sort of oriented around love, wisdom, and creativity. And so these are certainly the virtues that have attracted an increasing number of young people to the practice of Druidry today. There are three things that really you should bear in mind about the involvement of young people in Druidry. The first is it's actually quite unusual for people to be brought up in the Druid tradition. In fact, many Druid orders say that you can't actually initiate into Druidry until you reach the age of majority, sort of 18 or potentially 16, with your parents' permission in my tradition. Although you are seeing an increasing number of people joining, as the number of Druids increases, it's still quite rare. There are two other patterns that you notice. If you go along to gatherings or events in person, although these obviously haven't happened during COVID, you notice that there are actually relatively few young people at these spaces. The average age of these events when I first started going to Druid gatherings or groves was probably somewhere in the late 50s. And since in the 10 years that I've been involved in Druidry, it's actually increased quite a bit until the sort of late 60s, early 70s. So it's quite clear that a lot of people, it's quite clear that it would look from that the average age of the standard Druid is increasing, and that young people are just not interested. And indeed, some Druids I know have confessed that that is their impression. But what is really interesting, and particularly, and this is also the case of looking at the pagan community in the UK more generally, so if you look at witchcraft events, pagan conferences and so on, you see a very limited attendance among people under 40. But what you notice is that when you look online, you see a very, very different picture. So one particular hashtag, Witches of Instagram, has 6.5 million mentions, whereas the hashtag Christian has 13.5 million mentions. So, which gives you a sense of, considering how many, there's 1 billion Christians in the world and there's, probably only about 1 million witches, it gives you a sense of how many young people, the majority of people using this hashtag are indeed younger, are engaging with this tradition. So you see this huge efflorescence of interest in things like tarot, astrology, the sacred mysteries of the landscape impressed in ancient monuments, all within those sorts of space, all expressed online. So there's a real interesting sense that young people are getting involved online, getting involved virtually, but they're not joiners. They're not joining up with in-person social spaces particularly.
Thank you, Jonathan G. Next, we have Adriana Salazar. Adriana currently works as an agent of change in regenerative development in a global network. She currently holds degrees in tourism and hotel management, yoga, and Ayurvedic medicine. In the last 4 years, she has been actively collaborating in the strengthening of indigenous peoples' traditions in America. She has collaborated with Seva International, International Center for Cultural Studies, ICCS US. As an intercultural facilitator and event coordinator, she has worked for various indigenous elders gatherings, yoga events, and academic talks in different universities. Today, Adriana G is tuning in from Colombia. Welcome, Adriana G. So the question for you today is, how are young people embracing ancient traditions in your area, in your region?
Mm-hmm. Good morning, Actually, thank you for this invitation and good morning from here to everyone. I will answer this question considering two scenarios and also reading the situation in Latin America as a whole. If we see from the actual communities, indigenous communities that are living in the Amazon and social areas where we still preserve these cultures, it has been really difficult, a huge proof for them to try the children to maintain their culture and the youths, because of course the Western culture is really strong here, and so we are kind of really imposing this culture over to them. So for them, that's the fight when we think in those scenarios where they are actually living as a community, as an indigenous community. So for them, the huge strategy, I would say, is to implement indigenous own education system, which has been also a huge fight, because that means it needs to be proved by the government, which has been established in the Western world. So for them, in order to get like that approval, that their way of learning and the way of integrating in indigenous knowledge systems is also valid. It's been like ages and ages of fights. And also how these values guide cultural interrelationships with medicinal plants, because then as when we consider that they are biocultural. So it's not just the cultures, how they interrelate the whole nature in the way of how they integrate knowledge. So all these little things is something that it hasn't been easy. It's not easy, and it's currently something that they are standing for and trying to protect as much, and trying to organize themselves. They now are getting closer and closer to our way of organizing, just because that's the only position that for us, the Western or the governments can accept their way of living. So that's one dimension of the current situation here in Latin America. The other is more about, I would say, the position where I am at the moment, which is I was not born in an indigenous community. I'm in that mix between having indigenous roots, but also the Spanish. And now we are kind of realizing and reconnecting to our roots. So in that sense, I think, yes, the movement of coming back to this knowledge and everything is growing. There are more people kind of realizing and trying to bring different practices, learning from the elders that still exist in their communities. So we fortunately have the privilege to have them, have certain access to them, and so we can be part of their ceremonies and receive their medicinal plants, remedies, and all the stuff that help us in our path. So that's a privilege for us, and I think because of that reason, and because the music and so many things around has been helping us to get stronger and keep growing this movement. But so my answer goes in two scenarios and two perspectives, one from the actual communities and the other one is from as outsider, but also being from Latin America and recognizing that we all inhabit in this land.
Thank you, Adriana G. That was some very interesting perspectives, and I'm sure we'll explore those further in the next segment. Next, we have Tan Adam Krishna, who's originally from Vietnam, but currently tuning in from India this morning. Krishnaji is a Cham youth in search of preserving and promoting his minority ethnic, which currently he believes is on the edge of fading. He's currently studying a master's in art history in the National Museum Institute in India. He's an active member of the Cham Community Association in Vietnam and is also the conference coordinator for the Cham Raglai group in the 7th ICCS Global Conference. Welcome, Krishnaji.
Thank you.
How are young people embracing the Cham and other ancient traditions in Vietnam today?
Okay, thank you actually so much for introducing me and other speaker beautifully. So it is my honor to be here, and I would like to thank ICCS giving me an opportunity to share my point of view in this session. Before I start, I would like to share a bit about my tradition. Myself belong to Cham ethnic, which is an ethnic minority ethnic in Vietnam, and the majority ethnic is the King ethnic, or in this session I would call the Vietnamese. So our traditions are quite different with the Vietnamese, and easier to understand that our tradition is more close to Indonesia and Malay tradition, which have an influence from Hinduism and also Islamic philosophy. Yet we're having a belief system that harmonize these two philosophy with our ancestor legacy of worshiping nature-based god that we call Yang. Cham people are living across Vietnam from central coastal to the south of Vietnam and living in Palais. So also known as that small village or small communities. So every Palais of Cham usually have their own tradition, artisan. For example, like weaving tradition, pottery tradition, and medicine tradition. So that is a brief intro about our tradition. So to answering your question that how youth embracing our tradition. So me myself has experience to organize annually gathering of Cham people in Ho Chi Minh, where I could meet a lot of Cham students. So I found many interesting cases regarding to this topic, but due to the limit of time, I just would like to highlight only 2 cases that have helped interesting everyone. So the first case is the rise of Cham children living in urban city that cannot speak Cham language. So since I'm meeting up of a lot of Cham working study in Ho Chi Minh, I surprisingly found that many Cham children that I met that they cannot speak Cham language. They can understand, despite they can understand, but they're replying in Vietnamese language. This questioning me a lot, and I start to ask my friend and their parents also, and I found the story that I would like to share. That please note that this is not the case for all the children, but only especially the children of the parent that the generation are 5 or 10 years older than me. So come back to the story. I asked someone, why is this happening? So it's from the fear, the embarrassment, which became the obsession, follow these children parents. So the story go back when these parents live childhood, when they was born and raised in Cham village, and they go to school and meet their Vietnamese friend. As you may know, raising in Cham village, we were taught our mother tongue, which is Cham language, as the first language, and Vietnamese language as a later, as the second language. So therefore, when they go to school, when they meet with the majority friend, which is the Vietnamese, the accent is different. So sadly, this difference in accent become a joke of Vietnamese friend, where the majority, and this joke become the embarrassment, the obsession that follow until they move into major city. So because of the obsession, we all know that all the parents they want all the best for the children. So accidentally they teach their children with the Vietnamese first and Cham language second. So this make them unable to speak the Cham language fluently. So this is a very sad case. But however, in contrast, the second case I would like to share is something that might change everything completely, and that is the point that I would like to point out. The second case is the rise of wearing charm traditional clothes of nowadays youth. So I believe everyone know about Facebook, Insta, isn't it? So I also a hardcore of this social media also. And why exploring in this, I found very interesting trend today of youth where I found that I need to take everyone a little bit back ago when before the social media become to explore in our modern society. That at that time, I found very less youth wearing traditional clothes in my community. But yet, since the rise of Facebook and Insta, some pioneer, which they are only proud of wearing the charm traditional clothes, they start to wear this traditional clothes, and with their creative mind, they post on Facebook, on Insta, becomes super attractive that their image become that they share become viral. And this moment become what I would like to say is the trigger moment. So image the post that you post is become viral. And with this technology of nowadays social media, it starts to spreading the trend that make every youth want to achieve that look and share. And due to this, because of busy life of the city, many people tend to skip the festival. But because of this, now every charm festival, every youth want to go back to the festival and wearing the traditional clothes for Facebook posting. So even I found children, small children, they also cut. They're wearing traditional clothes in festival, which make the festival become so vibrant, and this make me so happy. And not only that, because of this also to trigger the youth to start to learn more about the tradition as well. So at my point is the importance of the trend of the importance of trend that affecting how the youth embrace their tradition.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Krishnaji. And actually, there are some points in there which you will continue to explore after the final statement. On that note, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our last panelist for this panel, Drishti G. May. Drishti G. May is tuning in from the UK this morning. She's currently the National President of the National Hindu Students Forum UK. Drishti graduated in chemistry from the University of York and now works in M&A integration at Unilever in the UK. Welcome, Drishti ji.
Namaste. Thank you. Thank you, Akshaya.
Now, the question that, once again, I'd like to ask you is, what are some of the central ideas in your tradition? And what's the involvement of young people in bringing this to life?
Sure. I'd just like to start off echoing some of what Krishnaji said. It's a real pleasure to join you here again for day 2. And what a wonderful, conference it has been. And what a wonderful panel to have so many different speakers here together. So really, really honored and thankful to be here. So thank you for that. So I will be representing Hindu Dharma, and I guess Dharma essentially. And likewise, I'm very aware that there have been great speakers before us. So I'll touch on a few areas, and I'll really focus in on the experience of youth as we see it here in the UK and also globally. So the Hindu identity rests on dharma. And if we look at the root of what dharma means, it essentially means that which sustains, that which upholds. And you can dissect that word in many ways, and you can come to the same conclusion. So what does that mean for the individual? Well, it means that you have a tradition, a heritage, a civilization that has and continues to focus on the individual's flourishing, the individual's well-being, and how that can be sustainable across society and across the ages. So each individual is encouraged to go and pursue their swadharma, their own individual dharma, with, once they've found that, once they've discovered that, once they've worked hard for it, their purpose, essentially, their swadharma, is aligned to that which benefits society. And so this idea of being alienated from the world, being alienated from nature, or from each other, ignoring the interconnectedness would not be dharmic. You must acknowledge that you are part of the universe, you are part of the world, that you and I and everyone tuning in is connected, And so my actions have a consequence for others as well, and for the universe. And we call that karma. So the individual's flourishing is connected to societal flourishing and is connected to dharma because it has to be sustainable. So that's like a central basis to start off with. Now, if we look at the world over, I think there are over 15%, like over 50% of our world's population would regard themselves as Hindu. So that's quite a significant number, which means, and also I guess confirms the fact that Hindu Dharma is a living, breathing civilization. Despite or in spite of the challenges that our ancestors have faced, it has survived. And I would argue we're in the position today where it is thriving. Different to what Jonathan G expressed at the start for Druidry, Hindus are born into the tradition, and we have a culture of inculcating sustainable values, dharmic values from a very young age. We sometimes call this sanskar, but that starts very, very young. And it goes through, it goes through life. And with this, we have utsavs, so festivals, we have rituals, we have different things that would go from the daily to the yearly to, to different phases of life where there would be a ritual or a practice or something to raise the awareness associated with it. Now, some young people may start off not necessarily understanding why they're doing it, or they're just doing it because that's their family culture, their home culture. But then we get to the second point, which is, I think a real beauty or a beautiful part when it comes to Hindu Dharma, and that is the idea of plurality, which is very different to, I think, the Abrahamic traditions that we know of in the world as well. And this is that you and I can have we can align ourselves with different schools of philosophy, different schools of thought, yet we can still see ourselves as Hindu and connect on that basis. We can still see ourselves as adherents of Dharma because we believe in sustainability. And there's something really beautiful and powerful about that, because when young people move into that phase where they're rebelling, they're questioning everything, there is freedom to do that. There's freedom to express Dharma differently, so that you are expressing Dharma rather than being destructive or, exclusive in nature. In my home, I think we have like 3 different schools of philosophy, or 3 different expressions happening simultaneously, yet we can still collectively come together as Hindu. And that for me is like, in a microcosm, a beautiful example of what this plurality means. All thoughts are welcome, but then they're also open to critique and questioning, so on and so forth. And so I'll wrap up now, but having it instilled from a young age, having this plurality, this ability to explore, having utsavs and festivals that bring people together, create a social atmosphere, allow for one's awareness to grow, exploring these central tenets of ahimsa, dharma, karma, so on and so forth, means that the affirmation of the Hindu identity can take place. It may not be when children are super young, it may be when they're slightly older, it may be after they've gone, after young people have gone to see the world and then come back. But that affirmation happens, and I would, I'd be quite optimistic and suggest that we're actually going through a renaissance where this plurality is attractive, this ability to work from principles as opposed to dogma is attractive, but it's also so natural because it removes the alienation of man and woman from the world, from nature, and from each other. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Drishti. It's been great to hear 4 different perspectives from each of our future leaders. So let's dive right into the discussion. I'm sure we as the audience have questions coming in, so please do continue to ask those questions. But the first aspect that I'd like to touch on that has been mentioned in different spheres is this notion of community. So Jonathan G, you almost mentioned that there's a little bit of a disconnect between the elders and the young people today in the Druid tradition, whereas Drishti Ji has almost contrasted that in saying that Hindus are brought up in a sense of community. So Jonathan G, my question to you first is, why is there that disconnect? You briefly touched on it, saying young people are not interested, but is there more to it?
Absolutely. So it's interesting actually, because I think that even though there is a perception that young people aren't interested in nature, spirituality, or druidry or witchcraft, there's this feeling that, oh, they'll get it when they get older, right? But actually what you see is, as evidenced by all the interest online around things like astrology and herbalism and so forth, and witchcraft and spellcraft, that actually people are really, really enthusiastic and passionate about it. But it's actually more that the way that the pagan community is structured and organized doesn't actually cater to young people, and it doesn't really meet the needs of young people. So in the chat, I noticed that people were asking questions about public transport. This is a huge issue. So a lot of pagan events are actually held in quite isolated rural areas, because a lot of our sacred sites are in rural locations. Those rural sites are kind of managed by heritage organizations. They're not managed by pagan organizations in the UK, really. So as a result, there isn't really much attempt to try and cater to people who might want to go and visit those sites at certain times of year. And the assumption, I think, of how things have worked historically is the assumption, oh, people can drive, it's fine, it's straightforward. But because of the fact that our community is very small, we don't have a lot of resources. The assumption is that people will have to make it there on their own steam. And the fact is that if a lot of young people are struggling these days with the difficulty in the economic situation that we're all facing, the rising cost of rent, rising cost of housing, rising cost of living, that means that fewer of us actually have the resources or the time or the bandwidth to participate in the community itself. And whereas I think with the British Hindu community, my observation is that because you have your family around you, they can help facilitate that those visits. Like if you need to go to a temple, or if you need time to participate in the community in some way, your family will support you in that. But it's just not the case with the pagan community, because we don't have that kind of pre-existing community around us. And so I think that's a key element. And I think I think there's also no support from wider society either, because the different pagan communities in the UK are not we're not subsidized by the government. We're not like the Church of England, where there is a large established church with supported by sort of endowments and charitable trusts that donate money to help people who want to explore the faith. There isn't anything like that. In fact, if you want to understand how the pagan community really works in Britain and many other countries, I think in Europe, the best way to think about it is a bit like a marketplace, right? You basically, there are different shops and websites you can go to buy the books that you need to do your training, and to buy tickets to go to events, and to buy the raw materials you need to make offerings to the gods. You buy that. It's not available there. And you see that in other faiths as well, but it's absolutely central within the pagan community. And I think that is something which can be a real blocker for certain kinds of people, because that marketplace is designed with a specific idea of who the customer is. And that customer is someone who is an individual person who's seeking after wisdom. They want initiation. They want to train to become a priest, essentially, within our traditions. And they have a disposable income and plenty of space and plenty of time to pursue all of that. In reality, a lot of people in the community who will benefit from spirituality don't want to become a priest. They just want to go along to an event. They just want to experience a taste of what's spiritual. They want a sense of meaning in their lives. They want ideas about clothes to wear, or culture to participate in. And they might be bringing up kids. They might have a busy job, so they wouldn't necessarily be able to undertake all of the sort of rigors of a priestly training. And so I think the way the pagan community is set up, it's set up as a marketplace with this specific customer base in mind. And I think that has the effect of excluding certain people. It excludes children, and it makes it harder for families to participate. And it certainly makes it, and that's not to say that I think that none of that is stuff which is insurmountable. And it also doesn't reflect the tradition itself, because the wisdom itself, the richness of it is universally worthwhile. But I think that the way it's kind of organically grown over the course of the 20th century has kind of, it doesn't cater to everyone. And I think it's just thinking about ways of making sure that it caters to everyone that we need to think about at the moment.
Absolutely, Jonathan G. I think you touched on some really interesting points there, which we're going to come to when we talk about social media. But I'd like to bring in Adriana G here. In the notion of community, you mentioned that, in your community, people are slowly reconnecting back to their roots. What is it that makes the young people want to reconnect back to their roots?
Mhm. Yeah, just before I answer, I wanted to say that yes, I'm really honored to be here, and it's very interesting to feel the different flavors that we all bring into the topic. And to answer that question is very complex, really. What a community has to face here in Colombia, for example, and in order to live in harmony, we have many things happening at the moment, and since years ago, ages ago, I would say, and it's a certain how would say that, like, just as scenarios that make our reality a little bit more complex. Yes, we have values, we have our purpose, our dharma. We, like, as an indigenous community, we believe that our dharma is to look after Mother Earth. That's the only thing, the reason why we're here for. But when you have that, and that's what you have in your heart, and that's how you try to bring within your family, but at the same time there is some other realities happening at the same time, like internal armed conflict, natural resources that has been destroyed by like companies that are interested in those resources, and so that means that they're against your dharma, they're against your purpose, like they're attacking you the whole time. So misinterpretation about medicinal plants, for example, as that now has been commercialized in a such a terrible way worldwide, and so the indigenous are trying to really hold and be super connected with the real meaning of the plants, and the meaning and how medicinal they are, and all this stuff. So I'm just sharing all of that with you because just to give you like the flavor from here that is pretty complex in terms of embracing or growing up and really trying to hold. There is so many distractions around, and not even considering about the actual Western culture that seems like more like flourish, or more attractive and all this stuff. So I guess the only reason, to be honest, that has been helping us to get stronger in this path are the actual medicinal plants, like the actual ceremonies, because there is something that takes you to another connection to this reality because of the medicine that it has inside, and that experience is super strong for anyone, like even for the elders, and in the communities, the children start taking these remedies like from super young, like when they're babies, they're starting to take like those like small doses, and so for us, when we just suddenly have these ceremonies, then we have like a deep connection of what is this all about, and especially the sensitivity of mother, like nature, like how life is, and this other like this beauty. So just to answer is the medicinal plants that I think that's the
That's interesting, Adriana G. So the connection to nature almost, and holding on to that nature is what brings young people back. And on that note of environment and nature, Drishti ji, you mentioned that Hindu Dharma is one that is not separate between the individual and the surrounding environment. So in today's world that we live in, with the climate crisis that's going on and other environmental factors, do you think that brings in or draws in young people to feel more responsible, and what's the connection between, I guess, channeling those values and putting them into practice in context today amongst our young people?
So if I've understood your question correctly, sorry, Akshayaji, how are these values translated and how do they manifest?
Absolutely.
Great. So something that I've had the pleasure of observing here in the UK is changing behaviours, starting from young people, but then also emanating through to community centres, mandirs, so on and so forth, is reinterpreting, and this is the beauty of having an evolving tradition, like I think we'd all agree, right? It's about evolving with the progress in science, knowledge that we're a very data and information rich world now. So as we become more aware of things, we look at our practices, we look at the values and the principles, and we say, okay, this is how they were applied in the past. How do I apply them now in the future? For example, dairy farming, how it was done 100, 300, 1,000 years ago is very different to how it's done now. I, as a consumer, I, as an active citizen of the world, I, as a child of the earth, have a responsibility to acknowledge that reality and then, tailor or change my actions in accordance to that. So something that we have seen is where I think within Hindu Dharma, there's been a big expression of vegetarianism. There's been a big expression of saying, I cannot cause harm. Who am I to cause harm to another living being that is interconnected with me? We're seeing that further evolve to say, actually, how can I take the milk from it, from a cow? How can I consume with what I'm wearing, the clothes that I'm wearing, so on and so forth. So that understanding is evolving when it comes to ahimsa, so minimizing harm to the earth, to the world, and to all living beings. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is, our mental health. I think we're living in a world where we really see an emphasis on that. So what is the language that we use? How do we communicate with one another? You can look to corporate structures, you can look to different institutions that exist, and it's typically had quite an aggressive archetype for growth, competitiveness, so on and so forth. And now with this emphasis on actually, if I am going to internalize dharma, if I'm going to internalize what is sustainable and minimizing harm and benefit, really throwing out love and compassion for all, my language, my speech, my character must reflect that. And so this emphasis on self-improvement, this emphasis on, can I bring people together rather than can I just be the one that shines, is also starting to manifest. So it's the internal and external environment. So, we've used animals as one, but I think it's also in our actions. Am I thinking of myself as an individual, or am I thinking of myself as a connected being? So from choices that we make to the jobs that we take, if we're going to sell our time, where are we selling it? We're seeing a difference in that. People are far more purpose-driven. Young people definitely feel far more capable to question, but they're also embracing the information-rich world that we have to say, how can I evolve my practice to apply? So I think there's a whole array of decisions, and I wouldn't have enough time to go through all of them.
No, thank you, Drishti. You set a good context for that integration between these values that we adopt in the traditions, but actually putting them into practice as young people. We're getting a lot of questions from our audience, which I think also touches upon some of the aspects that we've talked about today. So we'll dive straight into the audience questions, and so that we can get through as many questions as possible. It'd be great if we can keep our answers as succinct as possible. So the first question that we have actually comes to the situation that we're in today in the world of COVID-19. So this question is from Maitreyi and asks everyone, so if we can start from Krishna ji, and I'd like to hear from Jonathan ji on this one as well. What is the current with the current situation of COVID-19, how can youth embrace different cultures using the online platform? So how can the online platform work to our advantage in connecting to these ancient traditions? So Jonathan ji, if you start us off, we'll then go on to Krishna ji.
Of course, thank you. Yes, so I think one of the major reasons why there is a bit of a disjunct between the established Druid community, witch community, pagan community in the UK, and a lot of young practitioners, is because a lot of the people under 40 that I'm talking about are net natives. We've grown up with the internet. We're really quite savvy with how we use it. Whereas I think that a lot of the established pagan organizations have struggled a little bit with the internet, and have struggled to kind of take full advantage of it, particularly the shift towards very kind of very slickly designed websites, and I think the use of the internet as a source of information and a way of getting information out there, it took a bit of time for that to take off within the British pagan community. And I think that meant that because effectively the information isn't being circulated online, a lot of young people simply don't know that it's out there, and simply don't know the benefits of getting involved in the community itself. So I think getting better at using the internet is certainly something that needed to happen, and I feel that COVID has made that has forced the issue. So I think that's really something that's been something that I've seen a huge amount more events being held online, people getting better at using Zoom, people getting better at using YouTube, and existing practices and processes that Druids have been involved with, like Tea with a Druid, which is something that the Order of Bards, Oviates and Druids do, a podcast of Druidcast. They're reaching ever larger audiences. Even though they were set up before the pandemic, I think the pandemic has really kind of turbocharged them. So yeah, absolutely, that's been really, really beneficial. That has been a kind of making something good come out of a really difficult and hard situation for a lot of people, and making it more inclusive.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jonathan G. So podcast, teas, and innovative ways of using our online platform. Krishna G, you mentioned that social media gave a sense of pride with clothing and embracing that. So how can social media help, engage young people once again in the charm tradition?
Thank you for the question. I think in this COVID time, in my point of view, is a advantage, is a great point. Like before, now I see the gap between generation is greater than ever. Like before, every generation the gap is like 5 years, but now it's getting shorter and shorter. 2 years, like now, 2 years, the people, the youth that 2 years or younger than me, they speak. I don't even understand the trend of them. But now, because of the COVID, everyone is pushed to use social media, is pushed to use Instagram, Facebook, So it is accidentally become a great place for all of the generation to come. Like my father never used Facebook, but because of COVID, and everyone said COVID, use Facebook. So everyone, every generation come into one place and can hear each other again. So before, the youth, when they think something, they want to contribute, but then they clash with the older generation. But due to this, like the older generation, they can explore, they can see, oh, this is the beauty of younger generation. It is great. So they're more understanding the younger generation, and they just become connected. That is so amazing. And before, the voice of the youth needs to be placed in the right place to be heard. But now with Facebook, the voice is heard by everyone. So youth now, with the bold idea to change, that need the support from social, it's become true. So the social media and this COVID somehow it's like a miracle in some way for the aspect of embracing the tradition.
Wonderful. Thank you, Krishna Ji. We've had a question from Hetal Ji around language and factors attributing to this language that's being either diluted or not being embraced. So here I'd like to bring in Drishti Ji and Adriana Ji as well. What are some of the solutions that you have experienced or can think of that can allow young people to embrace the language of their tradition? Drishti Ji, if we can start with you.
Thank you. So I'm going to link language to identity. So one of the challenges I think we face not just in the UK, but in the world over, when it comes to Hindu identity or any dharmic identity, is what is associated, what are the connotations with that identity? And, whilst, I still stand by my statement of there is a renaissance in progress, there is still that hang up of a negative association with that identity. There is still a distaste, there is still misconceptions. These still exist, particularly, on the World Wide Web, but also in in-person interactions. And this has a knock-on effect, and it's a symbiotic relationship. It has a knock-on effect on the use of language, but it also comes from how language is used. So linguistic hygiene and the frameworks that we use are so important, right? Yes, you can speak in Sanskrit, and we're seeing definitely a revival of Sanskrit and, a lot of interest, not just in the UK, but in the world over, for this ancient language, for this beautiful language. But also, we've historically had words translated from Sanskrit into English that are just not accurate. And therefore they do not help propagate or promote an accurate or an authentic description or experience of dharma. So what we're seeing now, I think, is more and more people studying, more people looking to verify if the translations we are reading are actually quite authentic. So language is super important. We're seeing a movement in that direction. But even if we do not pursue the language, en masse, just being able to have that authenticity that translates across is super, super important.
Brilliant. Thank you, Drishti ji. Adriana ji, would you like to come in there and give your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I see a very close connection between language and education. And that's the reason why I'm saying this, is that it has been the only way here in Latin America to preserve languages has been through implementing the indigenous own education system. That has been a clue, because what makes the language are the practices. So if the practices disappear, that means that they're not going to use certain words and things that have been representing what the culture is doing, or what the scenario is showing to the children or the youth. So is so one thing goes to another. So we need to revitalize the practices and the scenario that talks about that unique language that is interconnected with that. So for that, it's very important the indigenous own education system, which the work is focused on, again, revitalization, the cultural plant practices, for example, and knowledge as a way to contribute to the resurrection of the culture. So I think that's the most important thing, is to promote and help and support that fight, because it's a fight. When we think in how the indigenous can create those institutions, because education, like schools, and those are institutions, so how they can build that, how they can make sure that it's respected, and that the children that are studying there are also well respected from the other youths and children that are not growing or learning in there. So it's something that needs to be it needs to keep growing as a system. Yeah.
No, thank you, Adriana ji. I think revitalization is a powerful word that you've used there, which brings us to, I guess, the closing question that I'd like to pose each of you future leaders here today. As future leaders, what is our responsibility in ensuring that these ancient traditions that we proudly practice not just sustain, but flourish in generations to come? If we could give that closing message to our audience. Jonathan G, we'll start with you.
Thank you. I think for me, certainly in reflecting on the remarks made across the conference so far, which have been really, really interesting, is it's all about access, and it's all about sort of providing people with the resources that they need to encounter these traditions. And I think a phrase that I often take with me in these situations is you've got to meet people where they're at. And I think there's, you know, as Adam has spoken about very eloquently, there's a huge amount of involvement amongst young people around the world in social media. And so making sure that our ancient traditions and our ancient knowledge is being sort of shared, disseminated, and celebrated over using revolutionary technologies, I think is a really crucial part of the piece. So, you know, and that the thing is that actually requires a couple of things. It requires communication, like we're doing now, working together, collaborating. That's really, really important. But it also requires resources. It requires money, it requires time, and it requires expertise, because to share stuff over social media in a way which is visually engaging and enchanting and is creatively accomplished, that requires a very specific set of skills. And I think we, as a network of practitioners, we need to work together to make sure that those resources are made available to everyone who needs them around the world.
Thank you, Jonathan Ji. Krishna Ji, over to you.
Thank you for a great question. So I believe that all of the great talk, all of the great plan is already there. The scholar sacrificed themselves to preserving the tradition is written somewhere, somehow. We just need to find trigger to bring for the youth, trigger the youth to look into that and bring it on and implement this as soon as possible. And the second thing that I would like to point out that we need to consider, we need to find a way to maintain this. I said it, execution team, like social activists, because so far as I know a lot of social activists. They have so many energy, so many great plans to make a change, but then, you know, like this is a long journey that need human resource and funding and everything, like Jonathan said, and we need to find a good way to maintain this. Like an idea of Jonathan of the specific market for everyone to come to, and then it's go on and it will maintain. That need to be implemented. That is need to be tried, because we fail and we know what is the best way. But the point is to maintain, and that will help the forefront of the people who change, who connect, who embrace the tradition, to keep up the flame and pass it to generations. So last thing, because of the gap of the generation, because of the trend thing, it keeps changing faster than ever. So we need to non-stop engagement with our next generation. That is a must. So to do not let that gap thing, when we have that gap, then it's very hard. So because of now the social media, I think is very, very, very great place for us to connect everything and keep to maintain this up. So I think that is all my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Krishna Ji. Adriana Ji, over to you.
I would say the beginning of the chain for answering this question from my point of view is home, which means the land, the territory. And if there is anything that we can do as leaders of trying to help the others, the communities, to have their own home, like to stay there protected, and you know, is the best thing that we can do, because that's where the knowledge is coming from the interconnection that they have been developing for ages and ages and ages ago, and that's where the knowledge is sustained, is where the consciousness is sustained as well. So the hardest the hardest part now is that we want those places, we want those territories. The war wants those territories, and they're taking away those territories. So that's, I think, the crucial part where we are breaking the chain. So I think if all the action can be focused on that, on taking care of the home, our home, that's, I think, that would be brilliant. Yeah.
Thank you, Adriana ji. And finally, over to you, Drishti ji.
Thank you. I think I have to echo everything that's already been said. What I will add is the concept of satsang, so good, positive, spiritual company. And this has to start young. So, there's a famous, or there's a popular adage in English, you are the sum of the people you surround yourself by. I think when we talk about our responsibility at JRG, we have to take that responsibility with our young people. What are they exposed to? What are the ideas they're exposed to? What do they spend their time doing? In every situation, you can do something constructive or you can do something destructive. How are we not just nudging, but really, creating those spaces where that positive environment, that spiritual environment, can not only be enjoyed by young people, but they then go on to lead this. I've been fortunate enough to experience this in the UK with Bal Gokulams, where young people come together, and these centers are run by parents. So the parents are developing, and the young people, the children are developing. And then they move on to these weekly meetings called shakas. And they're learning, and they're increasing not only their spiritual practice, but their pride and identity that Adriana has spoken about. Things become cool because your friends are surrounded by the same values. And so it comes into your social media, it comes into your daily expression. If we really do want to tackle the meta-narrative, we need role models. I think we have a responsibility there, and we must create these circles for satsang, for good, positive, spiritual environments to be maintained, sustained, and shared. Thank you.
Thank you, Drishti. And you know what, if it was up to me, I think we could continue this conversation for hours, because I, for one, have just learned so much in the last hour or so. But time has unfortunately come to an end this morning. But in one short hour, I can say we had the opportunity to travel right across the world and hear from each one of you future leaders on your perspectives on how young people are currently embracing their traditions, but also our collective responsibility in ensuring these traditions can not only sustain, but truly champion humanity. If I can do even justice, a little bit of justice, to summarize this whole panel in a few words, it would be, let's trigger our youth. Let's revitalize that spirit. Let's protect our home. Let's collaborate with these shared traditions that bind us and foster that global community with the virtual space as our advantage. And finally, let's continue to invigorate that positive spiritual company, that satsang, not just within our traditions, but with each of our traditions, to ensure that young people continue to embrace these ancient values. If there are questions that continue to emerge as we reflect on some of these key messages, do continue to engage in the community segment of our Whoolley app, one which I'm sure our panelists would be happy to continue the conversation beyond this panel. I would once again like to extend my gratitude to our four panelists, Jonathan ji, Adriana ji, Krishna ji, and Drishti ji, for taking us through their valuable insights and experiences. Thank you for joining us this morning, and I hope you can stay tuned for further exciting discussions over the rest of this ICCS Global Conference. Dhanyavad. Namaste.
Thank you, Akshayaji, for chairing that discussion. It was definitely fascinating listening to our active youth leaders and hearing their thoughts. So thank you for sharing your experience and your knowledge as well. Next, we are going to hear from Soumitraji Gokhale, who will be telling us the aims and objectives of ICCS. Soumitraji sits on the advisory board for the ICCS and has been working with ancient traditions since 2008. Over to Soumitraji.
Namaste, Soumitraji. Welcome to the 7th International Gathering of Elders organized by the International Center for Cultural Studies. Namaste.
Namaste, Sachinji. Thank you very much.
Now, Soumitraji, you sit as an advisor and on the advisory board for the ICCS International. And so you are the perfect candidate to ask the question, could you tell us a little bit about the aims and objectives of the ICCS globally?
Sure. So actually, I feel very fortunate that I have been able to attend all the 7 or the past 6 international elders conferences of the ancient traditions, and this is the 7th one which is happening virtually. And ICCS, the aim is to get all the people who are practitioners of their own ancient traditions together, to come together, to understand one another, to know about each other, and to try to revitalize these traditions, which have suffered a lot in the past couple of centuries especially. And now we find a movement throughout the world where people belonging to these ancient traditions, they want to go back to the roots, they want to kind of understand their own traditions from their own perspective, start practicing them, and bring that to life. So all such people, ICCS aims to bring them together, not only bring them together, not only to understand, but even to document, study, research, publish, and draw strength from each other. That is also the aim and objective of ICCS, and it has been doing for the past 20 plus years in all parts of the world, whether it is the African traditions, whether it is the pagan traditions in Europe, or the Southeast Asian traditions, or the native traditions in the Americas. And we found that there is a great amount of similarity, at least in spirit. The details may be different, but they share a lot of things in common, whether it is the search for truth, spirituality in life, connection with ancestors, a relationship with Mother Earth. So many things are there. And I think ICCS has been taking up different themes to highlight what each tradition has in each of these areas. So I think that's what ICCS has been doing in different parts of the world. And I'm glad that we are having the 7th conference, although it is virtual, but we are not skipping it. I think that's a great thing.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And Soumitraji, could you explain a little bit about why you believe it's important for these ancient traditions to be revitalized, and why you believe it's important for them to draw strength from each other? Why is this important now?
Absolutely. Actually, it is even more important now than even before. The past few centuries, we have seen a rise of human civilization in terms of economy, in terms of technology. And now we have realized that yes, the economies have risen. There is a tremendous amount of wealth in some parts of the world at least. And technology is also rising. But we have, in a way, destroyed the environment. Mother Earth is suffering. all the ancient traditions actually have a philosophy, a view of life, where there is a kind of a intimate relationship with Mother Earth. And hence, people who believe in that kind of worldview need to come together. There is a slogan where people say that we need to save the earth. Actually, we are trying to save ourselves. We are trying to serve our Mother Earth, and we will save ourselves. People who believe in this not only as a policy and strategy, but as a value of life, as a conviction in their life, such people should come together. And all the people of the ancient traditions believe in this. The very first conference in 2003, the Elders Conference rather, one of the slogans that was given is "Children of Mother Earth unite." And I think that is extremely important in today's situation. Also, all these traditions during the colonial period and even the period before that, because of proselytization efforts, they were maligned, they were attacked, societies were disrupted and destroyed. And now once again, they are trying to revive many of them. It is just going to be very good if all of them come together and share with each other their own efforts, how they have been doing, what are their successes, what is it that we can learn from each other. For that also, this coming together, I think, is quite important. Then all the ancient traditions have a complete view of life, not just one-sided, not just materialistic, not just spiritualistic, but a complete view of life, an integrated approach. And hence, to share each other's experiences in terms of not only individuals seeking of spiritual truths, but how to build the communities, how we can pass on these ideas and values to our next generation. How can they take it up? There are many experiments happening in different parts of the world. Coming together gives an opportunity to share that, learn from each other, and go back with renewed inspiration. And hence coming together, working together to work in our own areas. It is not to say that we have to merge together and become some kind of one group or like that, not necessarily. There will be diversity, because that is also something special about ancient traditions, that they all respect diversity. They believe that there are many paths and there can be many different ways to approach and achieve what we want to do, especially seeking the spiritual truth. And hence, respecting all the diversity, we can come together. And we can come together to work on common themes, common ideas, to be able to deal with modern human problems. Although these traditions are ancient, their philosophy, their value system is very much applicable even today. And many of those things, if that become the mainstay of our life in modern times, I think it will be really good for entire humanity and the entire human civilization. And hence coming together, working together, learning from each other, sharing with each other, drawing strength from each other becomes extremely important for all these things, I feel. And hopefully that kind of realization will come more and more.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. My final question, Soumituji, for you is ICCS has been doing tremendous work for over 20 years now, and it is a volunteer-led organization supported by well-wishers and people's good wishes. What are the traits that each of us should be cultivating at this conference that we can take back to our countries and to our traditions in terms of how we should work together, with what spirit? Could you tell us a little bit about the spirit of the volunteer?
Absolutely. I think first of all, the genuine interest in knowing about each other, to truly understand from their perspective. That spirit, that open-mindedness is the very first thing that we should do to be able to. So each one of us will have our own way of looking at things, but to be able to grasp what others are also saying about the same thing, I think that open-mindedness is the very first thing. Secondly, feeling that we have something larger to achieve, all of us together. That firm belief that we are here for a greater good. Yes, I believe and I am very proud about my tradition, and I will work hard in my own community. At the same time, I would like all others to do the same in their own community, but having respect for each other and working on common themes which are of greater interest. I think that should be the spirit. So one is open-mindedness, then having the greater purpose in mind, that is definitely there. Then many times there may be, things that come in the way of working together. Could be over-attachment to my own view, maybe individual egos, sometimes even collective egos, how we can rise above them. That is also an extremely important thing. And then not thinking only in terms of any kinds of gains, quote unquote, material gains, but working for something that is beyond our little existence. So I think having that kind of individual purpose, individual higher purpose, I think that should be the spirit of volunteering. And I have seen this in people coming, the delegates who have been to these conferences, or in whichever countries I go. And I make it a point to meet the elders as well as practitioners, young and not so young. And such individuals exist everywhere in all the communities. With that selflessness, that volunteerism will be very, very useful. And that should be the spirit, where we are not trying to talk over one another. We are not trying to prove ourselves better than somebody else. So once that is there, I think this world will be a much better and peaceful and harmonious place. All the ancient traditions have that kind of spirit embedded in their cultures. And that is why all these people coming together, actually it is not very difficult. Yeah, maybe the geographical distance keeps us, or the, some of them may not have the resources to do it. But now it has become very easy. Transportation, communication, and we can really interact with one another with ease. As far as the mindset is concerned, people of ancient traditions can easily work with each other. They already have it in their cultures. It's just that putting that effort, that voluntary effort, and doing it, getting it done, having that kind of drive to do it, if that is there, I believe that this movement will keep growing, and it is already global, but it will become a very strong movement that will come to really help humanity to rise above all the problems that we ourselves have created in the past few centuries. I really believe, I'm quite sanguine about all these people coming together and working together.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Soumitra-ji. And thank you for joining us on the conference. Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you, Soumitra-ji, for giving us a great overview of the ICCS work. I would now like to invite Jonathan to conduct a closing ceremony for today's event.
Thank you, Val, and thank you everyone for your attendance today, and to our wonderful speakers for their beautiful and fascinating contributions. So I'd like to invite you all to settle into your chair or wherever it is you have been listening to this conference, and to take a deep breath with the earth beneath your feet. And take another deep breath with the sky above your heads. And a final deep breath with the encircling sea around each and every land, each and every continent from which we are connecting with this call today. O gods of the elements, O gods of the mysteries, O gods of the fountains, thy joy the joy, thy light the light, thy peace the peace, thy peace the peace. Peace between neighbours, peace between kindred, peace between lovers, peace between person and person, peace between wife and husband, peace between woman and children. The peace of joys, the peace of lights, the peace of consolations, the peace of souls, the peace of the heavens, the peace of the holy women, the peace of the fairy bowers, the peace of peacefulness, the peace of everlasting. Go Rao Oli, a blessing on our land, a blessing on our lives. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
So the concluding prayer, sorry, am I supposed to wait for someone or? Okay, as the concluding prayer, I will recite the final message to humanity from the Rig Veda, the most ancient text of the Indian subcontinent. A translation of this prayer is: come together, assemble, speak together, let your minds be of one accord. In the same way as the ancient radiant ones partake from your appointed share, giving up all mutual conflict. Let your intentions be common, not against anyone, and virtuous. Let your wishes be common. The idea of concordance comes here. Let your thoughts be common, so that there is thorough union, good coexistence among you. And then there is the great resolution from King Rantideva: I don't desire kingdoms nor heavenly pleasures, not even freedom from the cycle of birth and death. All I desire is the total eradication of suffering of all beings. And then there is a short prayer to Mother Earth, which is seen as a home to diverse people with diverse tongues and customs from the Atharva Veda. The oceans are like her blue raiment, mountains like her beautiful breasts. We ask for forgiveness for touching her with our feet. The last verse will be a prayer to the master, teacher, present within the hearts of all beings, the master, which is the source of the light of consciousness that illuminates the mind and intellect of every living being. May that universal essence inspire us to choose the correct decisions. And then the last sentence is a prayer for world peace. So let me recite the original mantras in front of you. Sangachadhvam samvadadhvam samvomanansi janatam deva bhagam yatha purve sanjanana upasate samaniva akutihi samana hridayanivaha samanamastu vo mano yathavaha susahasati. Om sarve bhavantu sukhinah sarve santu niramayah sarve bhadrani pashyantu Ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om shantihi 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 natvaham kamaye rajyam na swargam na punarbhavam Kamaye dukkhatattanam praninamartinashanam samudra vasane devi parvatastana mandale vishnu patni namastubhyam padasparasham Kshamaswame Brahmanandam Paramasukhadam Kevalam Dhyanamurtim Dvandvatitam Gagana Sadrisham Tattvamasyaadilaksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Saravadhi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Tribunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami. Om Shantihi 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 Vishwa Shantihi. Oh, peace, peace, peace in the world. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you, Jonathan Ji and Siddartha Ji, for a wonderful closing ceremony and prayer. The time has flown by and now we have approached the end of our Europe and Africa regional program. It's been informative and it's been an inspiring weekend, but it hasn't finished yet. We have a special program lined up for you all. Today at 4 p.m. GMT, we have a global keynote speech with Judy Lingwang and Ranga Hariji. We would love for you to join us. Thereafter, you can join the Americas regional program, which starts at 6 p.m. UK time, in which they will discuss the rights of the living pristine rainforest and a native youth panel discussion. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the speakers who have joined us today, and a special thanks to you at home for attending this conference and getting informed and inspired, and hopefully you have picked up your instructions to act and as it was put, act locally as well. So namaste from all of us here, with lots of love and light to you all.